Where is my voice in the new AI economy? This was a question I asked myself as I delved deep into what AI is. I wanted to understand the fundamental base of how AI is built, which is primarily on data. And as I zoomed further out from that perspective, that deeper perspective, I started noticing the implications that this can actually have to our businesses, to our society, to the world at large. So then I started thinking, how do I get my voice in AI, being a minority woman, a person of color, an indigenous representation of the data that has been primarily biased towards white, Western, industrial, democratic views of where big tech is actually coming from, and modeling our AI models off different platforms and different sects of society and subcultures of society really deters people like me from being involved in that discussion, because sometimes we don't feel that we belong. And so my challenge to everyone that I talk to about AI is, how can we make AI more equitable, more democratic, more fair? And what does that look like from their perspective? Because we are all on a different journey. We all have different digital maturity. We all have different technical literacy. And how do we combine that so that we are actually all involved in the AI economy? You hear a lot of talk from politicians on how we are aligning AI, how are we regulating AI, but ultimately how AI shapes our society will be up to us. How we implement it, how we're gonna use it, what we feed it, and what we won't feed it. And that has to be a larger discussion that involves everybody's voice. Not just technical people, not just politicians, but everyone that this impacts. And that will be everybody, because our technology has now become so ingrained in our society, from our social networks to our businesses, and even to how we interact with our governments when everything is becoming digital. And the paradox of that is, with digitalization, yes, we are more connected. Yes, the promise of transparency and equitability will be built in by design, but that may not be the case with AI models. And that is definitely more complicated the more we ingrain it into how we harvest our data into the models. That changes how the model will behave over time. So the social, technological implications of this does become much more complicated. And this is what got me into AI in the first place, because it was a very big question that made me delve not only into myself to understand where my biases are, where my limitations are, where my knowledge gaps are, but the same can be used, that critical thinking needs to be used in how we're going to be implementing AI moving forward into the future. So my main message is, are we building a society around technology, or are we building technology around society? And what does that look like for you? As an individual, as a member of society, as an organization, and then in a bigger picture, as a politician or a leader that is actually involved in shaping what this rhetoric is going to look like and aligning it truly with society. And the biggest and easiest way to do that is to involve society in that discussion through surveying, through feedbacks, getting voices heard, raising the concern, amplifying those voices, and rectifying it so that it actually involves them in that process and makes it more fair. And I can name 100 different ways that you can do that, but I would rather, in fact, encourage you to explore it yourself. What does AI mean to you? And what does fairness look like to you in terms of algorithms? If, for example, you're on a platform and you say something controversial against the masses, we have this horrible culture we call cancel culture. And within that cancel culture comes moderation. And if they automate that moderation, is your voice now being heard? In fact, if you want to bring up any point against how you're being treated on the platform or society at large? Do you have an outlet for that? And are politicians protecting that right of freedom of speech? And that gets very convoluted when social platforms have more power and influence than the news and journalists that do the investigative work to uphold the truth in society. And even more so with institutions that have expertise in certain things and government institutions that should have authority over certain laws that has been bulldozed by social whims and social influence of sheep mentality of whatever is trending. So then we take a step back and say, in the advent of AI, are we upholding the democratic values that we still want to see in this world? Or are we, is this going to be a mirror to actually what is unequal in this world? What is unjust and what is unfair? And now that we know that, what are we going to do about it? There needs to be action. We need to be vigilant in our discernment on what is true and what is not. And whatever resonates with you and what you've self-developed so that you don't need to be told how to think, but you can critically think for yourself and what you don't project out into the world, but can actually sit back and observe and make your own decision as to what is actually being fed to you throughout these social media platforms and technology platforms. Because this is the age of AI, but I like to call it actually the age of discernment. How do you know what is true and what is not? And the only truth that you can trust is yourself. But that self-awareness needs to be built, that self-resilience needs to be built, that cognitive resilience needs to be realized, because you're up against a lot of very powerful messaging, a lot of very powerful technology that is shaping you whether you realize it or not. And so it's very important to always take a step back and observe and realize that AI is not an all-knowing oracle, nor should it be. It is what we make it is what we shape of it, and it is what we decide that it should be for us and to us as a society at large. So it's a matter of asking yourself these very critical questions, because to me, that is not only internal alignment, it will eventually lead to societal alignment. Because you need to be engaged and active in this discussion. All of us need to be. And we all matter in this discussion. Because if your voice is not in AI, then the algorithms will work against you. Bigger scheme of things, I want reform in how technology has been behaving. Because in the way we are now is they can rewrite the terms and conditions overnight, and we are locked in and we can't get out. So we are basically hostages to the system. So if they decide, hey, by the way, which they have done, by the way, all Meta products, we're gonna scrape everything you ever have. It's our content. Your voice, your likeness, your pictures, any conversation you've ever had on our platform is getting fed into our AI. And you have basically 1 day to opt out, as in delete your entire account and get off. And so now we're in this kind of hostage situation with technology, where if we don't want to play by their rules, they're basically cancel us. We're basically out of the loop. And this is something very powerful in the business model called network effects. The more people are on the platform, the more valuable it is. And when people start building businesses and following and influence on a platform, it's very hard for them to quit, because that is a revenue stream. That is they spend years building a personal brand. They advertise on there, et cetera, et cetera. So when you have this kind of dependent relationship, it's very hard to negotiate with a hostage when you have really no choice in this. And what we're doing right now in the EU is we're trying to regulate it, right? We're trying to put GDPR compliance. We're trying to have AI EU Act, but it's still very loose, and it has no teeth, and it relies on a trust system that has been fundamentally broken for many years, because we've seen over time that big tech is only for profit. It's only for engagement, and it's only for their purposes, not society at large. And they're not taking any responsibility for what actually happens on their platform. In fact, quite the opposite. They have exploited the fact they have these platforms to shape politics and basically sell whatever influence they have to the highest bidder through adverbs and echo chambers.